Haha! With all this talk of how AI is taking over everything, I figured why not make it work for me instead? After all, goodness knows it's taken over my own job in my day-to-day. And to tell you, that hurts. That hurts quite a lot. So I figured why not try to use it to prove a point in why it shouldn't be relied upon and write something god-awful. So here I am. So I input a few writing prompts into ChatGPT, of which you can find in the description below, with really the only introduction being that it has to involve a character going to Bandcamp for the first time. Here are the strange results. Chapter 1. The Uncharted Symphony. Bandcamp. 2 words that strike terror into the hearts of teenagers everywhere. Well, maybe not terror exactly, but definitely a potent mix of dread and resignation. And there I was, 15 years old, standing on the threshold of what promised to be the most educational summer of my life. My name is Alex, and up until this point, my musical experience was limited to blasting rock tunes in my bedroom and occasionally attempting to play Smoke on the Water on my dad's old guitar. But my parents, in their infinite wisdom, or sadism depending on how you looked at it, had decided it was time for me to broaden my horizons. And what better way to do that than by spending 2 weeks in the wilderness with a bunch of other kids who were equally clueless about music. As I lugged my suitcase across the gravel path leading to the camp entrance, I couldn't help but wonder what fresh hell awaited me inside. The buildings loomed ahead, a sprawling complex of cabins and rehearsal halls surrounded by towering pine trees. A cacophony of discordant notes drifted through the air, evidence that the other campers had already begun their musical odyssey. I took a deep breath and squared my shoulders, steeling myself for the inevitable trials that lay ahead. With a muttered curse under my breath, I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior of the main lodge was a whirlwind of activity. Kids were scattered everywhere, some tuning instruments, others engaged in heated discussions about the finer points of music theory. It was like stepping into a different universe, one where the laws of coolness and social hierarchy no longer applied. I glanced around, searching for some sign of familiarity in this sea of strangers, and then I saw her. A girl standing off to the side, her red hair a fiery contrast against the drab backdrop of the lodge. She caught my eye and offered a tentative smile, and for a moment I felt a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. But before I could even make my way over to introduce myself, a booming voice echoed through the room, cutting through the chatter like a knife. "Attention campers!" the voice called out. "Welcome to Bandcamp 2024. All eyes turned towards the source of the sound, where a middle-aged man stood in front of the room, his conductor's baton held aloft like a scepter of authority. "I am Mr. Thompson, your fearless leader for the next 2 weeks, he announced, his voice dripping with enthusiasm. "And I promise you, by the time you leave this camp, you will be transformed into musical virtuosos." I exchanged a glance with the red-haired girl, and we both stifled a laugh. Musical virtuosos? More like a ragtag bunch of misfits with varying degrees of talent and enthusiasm. But before we could dwell on the absurdity of Mr. Thompson's proclamation, he continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Now, I know some of you may be feeling apprehensive about being away from home for the first time," he said, his eyes scanning the room with a mixture of sympathy and determination. "But I assure you, Bandcamp is not just about music. It's about friendship, teamwork, and pushing yourself to new heights." I rolled my eyes, but even I couldn't deny the truth in his words. Bandcamp may not be my idea of a dream vacation, but maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't be a total disaster either. As Mr. Thompson launched into a lengthy diatribe about camp rules and regulations, I let my mind wander, wondering what other surprises awaited me in the days ahead. Little did I know, the biggest surprise of all was still to come. Just as Mr. Thompson reached the climax of his speech, a loud crash echoed through the room, followed by a chorus of startled gasps. I turned towards the source of the commotion, my heart pounding in my chest, and that's when I saw it, or rather him. A boy no older than me, standing in the doorway with a look of sheer panic on his face. He was clutching a trombone in one hand and a shattered piece of wood in the other, his eyes wide with horror as he surveyed the wreckage at his feet. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as the room collectively held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. And then, with a resigned sigh, Mr. Thompson stepped forward, a weary expression on his face. "Well," he said, his voice tinged with exasperation, "I guess band camp just got a whole lot more interesting." Chapter 2: The Trombone Incident. The tension in the room dissipated as Mr. Thompson approached the new arrival, who was still standing frozen in the doorway, looking like a deer caught in headlights. With a practiced calm, Mr. Thompson gently took the broken trombone from the boy's trembling hand. "Accidents happen," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle given the circumstances. "We'll get this sorted out. In the meantime, why don't you join the rest of the campers over there?" The boy nodded mutely, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment as he shuffled towards the group of kids huddled in the corner. I watched him go, feeling a pang of sympathy mingled with curiosity. Who was he, and what had brought him to band camp? As Mr. Thompson launched into a spiel about the importance of safety protocols, I found myself drifting towards the boy, unable to resist the pull of intrigue. He looked up as I approached, his eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and relief. "Hey," I said, offering a tentative smile. "I'm Alex." He hesitated for a moment before returning the gesture. "Evan," he replied, his voice tinged with uncertainty. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, neither of us sure what to say next. But then, as if on cue, a loud snort erupted from the group of kids nearby, followed by a burst of raucous laughter. I glanced over my shoulder to see a trio of boys, all decked out in marching band t-shirts and smirks plastered across their faces, pointing and whispering amongst themselves. It was clear that Evan had already become the subject of their amusement. I felt a surge of indignation on Evan's behalf. Sure, he might have had a bit of a rough start, but there was no reason for these jerks to make fun of him. Before I could stop myself, I found my feet carrying me towards the group, my fists clenched at my sides. "Hey!" I called out, my voice sharper than I intended. "Cut it out!" "What's your problem, newbie?" he sneered. "My problem is you," I shot back, feeling a surge of righteous anger. "Leave Evan alone!" The blonde kid's smirk faltered, replaced by a scowl of irritation. But before he could respond, Mr. Thompson appeared at my side, his presence commanding attention. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The blonde kid opened his mouth to protest, but Mr. Thompson held up a hand, cutting him off. "I don't want to hear it," he said, his gaze flicking between the group of boys and Evan, who was hovering anxiously at my side. "We're all here to learn and grow as musicians. That means treating each other with respect." With that, he turned and strode away, leaving the group of boys glaring after him in frustration. I breathed a sigh of relief, grateful for Mr. Thompson's intervention. "Thanks," Evan said quietly, his eyes meeting mine with a hint of gratitude. "No problem," I replied with a shrug. "Just remember, we're all in this together." Evan nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. And in that moment, I knew that despite the challenges that lay ahead, band camp may not be so bad after all. Little did I know, the events of that afternoon were just the beginning of a much larger mystery that would test our friendship in ways we never imagined. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first strains of evening rehearsal filled the air, I couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was afoot at band camp. And it was only a matter of time before we uncovered the truth. But as I glanced over at Evan, determination burning in his eyes, I knew that whatever obstacles lay ahead, we would face them together. Little did we know, the biggest challenge of all was yet to come. Just as the final notes of the rehearsal echoed into the night, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air, sending a chill down my spine. And that's when I knew band camp was about to get a whole lot more interesting. Chapter 3: Shadows of the Night. The scream echoed through the darkness, sending shivers down my spine. Evan and I exchanged a glance, our eyes wide with apprehension. Without a word, we took off towards the source of the sound, our footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. As we navigated the winding paths of the camp, the trees seemed to close in around us, casting eerie shadows that danced in the moonlight. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs sent my heart racing, my senses heightened by the thrill of the chase. Finally, we reached the clearing where the scream had originated. The scene before us was like something out of a nightmare, a figure huddled on the ground, bathed in moonlight and writhing in agony. "Evan, look!" I exclaimed, my voice barely a whisper. Together we crept closer, our hearts pounding in our chests. And then, with a shock, I realised who it was. One of the camp counsellors. His face contorted in pain as he clutched his leg. "What happened?" Evan asked, his voice tinged with concern. The counsellor looked up at us, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," he gasped. "Something attacked me. It came out of nowhere." I felt a chill run down my spine as I glanced around the clearing, searching for any sign of the mysterious assailant. But all I saw was darkness, an endless expanse of shadows that seemed to swallow us whole. "We need to get help," Evan said, his voice urgent. I nodded, my mind racing as we helped the counsellor to his feet and began to make our way back to the main lodge. But as we rounded a bend in the path, a figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking our way. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I stared at the newcomer, a tall, imposing figure with a sinister gleam in his eyes. He was dressed in all black, his face obscured by the darkness. "Who are you?" Evan demanded, his voice shaking with fear. The figure didn't respond, instead taking a step closer, his movements slow and deliberate. I felt a surge of panic rising in my chest as I glanced around, searching for an escape route. But before I could make a move, a voice rang out from beside us, a voice that sent a chill down my spine. "Stop right there!" I turned to see Mr. Thompson striding towards us, a determined look on his face. In his hand, he held a gleaming conductor's baton, its polished surface glinting in the moonlight. The figure hesitated for a moment, as if weighing his options. And then, with a curse under his breath, he turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving us standing there in stunned silence. "What was that?" Evan whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. "I don't know," I replied, my mind reeling with possibilities. "But one thing's for sure, Bandcamp's just gotten a whole lot more dangerous." As Mr. Thompson helped the injured counsellor back to the lodge, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were just scratching the surface of a much larger mystery. As I glanced up at the moon, its pale light casting long shadows across the clearing, I knew that the night held many more secrets waiting to be uncovered. But for now, all we could do was wait and pray that whatever lurked in the darkness didn't come for us next. Chapter 4: Rhythms and Rumours. The incident in the woods had cast a shadow over Bandcamp, but as the days went by, life settled into a strange sort of routine. Rehearsals became a whirlwind of chaos and camaraderie, with Mr. Thompson at the helm conducting with a fervour that bordered on madness. Evan and I found ourselves drawn into the heart of the mystery, determined to uncover the truth behind the attack on the counsellor. But as we delved deeper into the secrets of Bandcamp, we soon discovered that not everything was as it seemed. Our investigations led us down a rabbit hole of rumours and speculation, each more outlandish than the last. Some claimed that the attack was the work of a rogue bear, while others whispered of a ghost haunting the woods. But the most intriguing theory of all involved a shadowy figure known only as the Drummer. According to camp legend, the Drummer was a former camper who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind nothing but a snare drum and a trail of unanswered questions. As Evan and I compared notes in the safety of our cabin, we couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement at the prospect of unravelling the truth. But our enthusiasm was short-lived, as a loud explosion rocked the camp, sending us scrambling for cover. "What was that?" Evan exclaimed, his eyes wide with alarm. I peered out the window, my heart racing as I tried to make sense of the chaos unfolding outside. And that's when I saw him. A figure emerging from the smoke, his snare drum slung over his shoulder and a mischievous grin on his face. "Looks like we've got ourselves a new player in town," I said, my voice tinged with amusement. Evan followed my gaze, his expression shifting from fear to curiosity. "Who is he?" I shrugged, unable to tear my eyes away from the spectacle unfolding before us. "I don't know, but something tells me he's about to make things a whole lot more interesting." As the drummer strode into the centre of the camp, his presence commanding attention, I couldn't help but admire his swagger. He was like a character straight out of a movie, all charm and charisma, with a dash of reckless abandon thrown in for good measure. And as he began to play, the rhythm of his drum echoing through the night air, I felt a surge of excitement coursing through my veins. Bandcamp might have its fair share of mysteries and dangers, but one thing was for sure, with the drummer in town, it was bound to be one hell of a ride. As the crowd gathered around, drawn in by the infectious beat, I couldn't help but smile. Despite the chaos and uncertainty, there was something undeniably magical about Bandcamp. Something that brought us all together in ways we never thought possible. But as the night wore on and the music reached a further pitch, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something big, something explosive. And sure enough, just as the drummer launched into his grand finale, there was a deafening roar as something exploded in the distance, sending shockwaves rippling through the camp. As the smoke cleared and the dust settled, I exchanged a glance with Evan, our eyes wide with disbelief. "Well," I said with a grin, "looks like Bandcamp just got a whole lot more explosive." Okay, I'm going to stop there for part 1 of this. What a bizarre intro. I thought the drummer was like a mystery, a person that had disappeared, and now they're just here like a character who's just full of charisma. Like nothing ever happened. It's very, very odd, very strange. I'm planning to do 12 chapters of this, so we have a 3-part adventure of AI joy ahead of us. But no matter what the future chapters have in store, one thing's for sure. Bandcamp AI just got a whole lot more weird, because that's a sentence that keeps repeating. If you like this video and want to see more storytelling goodness, then make sure to subscribe to SoS Storytelling and give this video a like. Until next time, see ya!